And welcome to Pulp Mythos. I'm Brian here with Larry and Spencer, and we're going to be discussing The Wheel of Time, episode number 8. I did not know this was the finale. I was under the impression we had at least one or two more episodes, but this is it until, well, they're already in production with season 2, so I'm assuming in a year or so we'll get the next season. But yeah, we're going to talk about the finale. If you've not hit the sub button, please do so. Leave a like, leave a comment, and let's start with we'll start with the opening. So there were rumors that they were going to do the prologue from the book, from the first book. They didn't exactly, but we did get a flashback of 3,000 years. So we did get to see the events leading up to the prologue. So if you watch that opening and you want to know what happens next, go read the opening of the Wheel of Time, and you'll see what happens. But basically, the takeaway from that scene, in my opinion, or the cool thing is, look at how advanced they were. You know, we had legit cities and skyscrapers and flying vehicles, and look at where they were and to where they are now. And you see when the things went bad, they went really bad. And so yeah, any thoughts on that, Spencer? You're reading the book, so you've read that prologue. Um, But yeah, just thoughts on what they did show us.
Well, it when I watched it, it to me just feels we talk about shows having like allegories and trying to make statements, I guess. But this one, I mean, there's lots of I don't want to say factual evidence, but you look at like Atlantis, the Mayans, the Incas, like all these past civilizations that were really advanced, and we talk about the Easter Island, all those statues and the pyramids and all these things where if you don't believe in aliens helping them, um, how advanced these societies were before the Dark Ages and everything kind of reverted back there for a little while. Uh, that's what this felt like. Was we talk about Atlantis, and they always talk about how the lost city of Atlantis was it this super advanced civilization that basically just was wiped off the you know face of the earth. But it feels as though they're stating that this kind of stuff happens, and not just in a fantasy setting, but in real life. We've basically started over, and to me it shows they're trying to ground it in reality. Even though I think I only have like 8 to 10 chapters left in the book, and then I'm done with the first book. I already got the second one downloaded, but it it feels as though that's how they're trying to ground it in reality, even with the prologue and the beginning of this show. um, that even though there's magic and the one source and all this stuff, that society, just like the earth, is kind of runs in cycles, and we're seeing the next age of this cycle.
Well, yeah, and I get what you're saying because we know that a lot of those Renaissance ideas that we saw, there were people that had those ideas before them and they were lost, and there was the Library of Alexandria and whatnot, and it was also neat to see because I had no idea someone who isn't anywhere near as far in the books as Spencer is that that anything this advanced existed before them, and that was kind of cool, and also kind of forewarns in a way, about warns against doing exactly what they're doing, that how dangerous it is to rush in to trying to kill the Dark One, and without thinking, without actually planning, because they lost all that, and as we can see in the current setting, they're back to pretty much a medieval setting.
And getting into the conflict with the Dark One, we'll go right into to how they handled that in the show. So we have Rand and we have Moraine, and they're basically going to the eye of the world where they're going to confront him. She gives Rand a magical, I'll just say a magical item. She gives a little background on how it was powered, essentially. But the idea is he'll use it, he'll power up, and then he'll defeat the Dark One. Uh, it it's funny how she really didn't have too good of a plan. Rand didn't have really a plan. He even points it out. He's like, you didn't think it was me. You thought it was Egwene. That's why you were training her, not me. He's like, what am I supposed to do? And her whole thing was, it'll just work itself out. That's the way it came off to me, at least. But we got a really cool scene with the Dark One where it's sort of the temptation of Christ type thing going on. He's basically like, look, I'll hook you up with all this stuff. Rand rejects it, uses the magical item to quote unquote defeat the Dark One. As he's disappearing, you see a smirk on his face. Clearly, this was not anything in terms of a defeating of him. This was more of a test, a trap slash test between the Dark One and Rand. So I thought it was handled okay. Comparing it to, I didn't know where they were going with this. I didn't know what they were going to do based on the book. I thought this worked out okay. Rand wants to sort of go into exile now because he has touched the one power, and he's afraid, he'll go crazy and kill his friends. That's fine. That's interesting, and I guess that'll be sort of a conflict in the second season. But in terms of all those interactions, how did you guys feel about how the story was told, how it wrapped up? Did you have any complaints about it, or did it just work for you?
I have a lot of questions, which I guess isn't bad, knowing that they already have a second season. So it's not going to be, me wondering whether or not they're going to answer all these questions. Because when I almost went into the other part, but even looking at, Rand Moraine, they talk about how, I don't know if he took her power, he pulled the old Avatar state and took her power away, or if it's just blocked temporarily. Like they didn't really explain what, if she's lost it forever, so I'm kind of curious as to where they're going to go from there, because the only reason that Rand was protected from the Dark One was because of her. Because when he started being around her more, he stopped being affected as much. His only respite from the dreams and everything else was when he was around her. And that's referenced in the book a lot. But now that she doesn't have that power, she's not in touch with the one source. Is he now more susceptible to the Dark One? So say he exiles himself to protect everybody. Who's to say that he wouldn't just basically turn into, and I'm assuming he wouldn't, just because he's, the Luke Skywalker of this series, but who's to say he wouldn't? He might be the Vader. Shit, I don't know. But it seems as though him trying to exile himself would only make him more susceptible to the Dark One, and like pushing himself over to the dark side, than if he would stay around and either work with Moraine or the rest of his crew and try to figure out what their destiny is. I think exiling himself, although he kind of made reference to it, would be not only a cop out, because they're going to shoot him by himself while the rest of them go do something else. To me, even looking at show structure wise, that would be stupid.
Yeah, it's well, my guess would be that, since they seem to be hinting a lot that him and the Dark One, that they're, like sort of potentially an equal and potentially opposite force. Like, I think at some point he'll be able to, you know, restore Moraine's powers, unless she finds a way to do it herself. But I think it'll be through Rand, and as he sort of figures out who he is and how to use his powers, and But in the meantime, I think it'll be an interesting story, seeing how she adapts to that herself. About to not having any sort of magical powers at all. What is her story now? Like, yes, still she may be to some degree a guiding force for the rest of the group, but now she doesn't have any of her abilities as an Aes Sedai, and we'll see how she adapts to that.
The other big story, it's sort of split into two, so I guess we'll talk about both parts, was the invasion, or the attempted invasion of this large city. And the first part, we'll jump into the Egwene Nynaeve part because I thought it was pretty cool the way they did it. But basically, the Trolloc army's coming in. Everything's going really bad, and so all those who have the ability to touch the source join forces, um, including Egwene and Nynaeve, and they use the power, the one source, to basically obliterate the army. But they touch it so, I mean, they're so in tune with it that they literally burn out, and so most of them die, including Nynaeve, who Egwene heals in the end. Um, it was a cool sequence. I thought it was an interesting. It was cool the way they did it. It's not in the book at all, unless it's in a future book, but it was cool. The I didn't like the. I guess it was to show Egwene's abilities, how good she is at just how powerful she is. I didn't think it was necessary to have Nynaeve die and then not be dead. I but it was fine. But what did y'all think about that particular part?
I I had less of an issue with that particular scene. Yeah, from what I've read in the first book and what I can remember, that definitely did not.
No,
But
nothing
I've
like
also,
that.
yeah, but I also didn't have an issue with it only
Yeah,
because the way that it's kind of been an underlying theme throughout the entire series is how even it's mostly the men that go crazy, but if anybody cannot control the one source,
exactly.
it overpowers you. So this to me was just another example of that, and they did it one in a really cool way. They were able to uh take out an entire army and then find out that it was basically just a like decoy so that they could go do something else. Like to me it set up a really cool story, um with the Pad and Fane, and you had the effect that the one source can have. So to me, it played into the plot a lot better, and it also expanded it a lot further. And I think if Larry's right, and you have Rand basically ramping himself up, or even Egwene or Nynaeve, who are both very powerful. They're not Aes Sedai yet, but I'm assuming at least one of them will become so. Uh, one of them could give Moraine her power back. So even though that scene kind of irritated me just because I didn't really understand where they were going, and I couldn't figure out a way that it would make sense and not be stupid. Uh, so that's the only thing that might make it make sense. But to me, it's pushing Rand in a different direction by having her not have any powers. And I don't know if that's going to be the entire second season, is him just dealing with that adversity and trying not to give into the dark side. And I'm like, oh God, I hope not. I hope they do it for like an episode and then they get hurt.
I hope it's like you said, one episode, maybe two.
Well,
But
because at
yeah,
the beginning of this series, like he was kind of that whiny, but then they explained it a little bit and then
I
they did a good job of moving past it. So I hope
I,
they do the same thing.
I thought they did a good job with his story arc in terms of the moment when he turned against the Dark One, because I thought it was cool that it was a selfless act. His whole thing was, hey, this is what you want, and he's like, it is, but it's not what she wants. And it was a moment where I thought it was sort of like that mature moment for the character, and I was like, okay, I thought that was cool. The reason he turned was, he knows that she wants to, have powers and, go off and, do her own thing. And so for him, that's what turned him away. So the temptation of him getting what it's sort of sappy, but what he really wants is her to be happy, and he knows that that fantasy would not truly make her happy. And so I thought that was handled well. I thought that was actually very well done. But then when we get to that last shot of him being like, I'm going into exile, then I felt that was almost going backwards into like, oh no, sort of like, oh, I can't be around them because I'll hurt them. And you know what I mean? Like I felt we had made progress with the character's arc, and then we sort of took a few steps back.
Well, because Min, too, the lady who could not necessarily see the future, but kind of see the auras around him, the lady that was in the bar, she's introduced super early in the books. Like right when they all get separated, that shit happens. Like right before they get separated, they run into Min, and her and Rand have this interaction. And this isn't like a huge spoiler or nothing because, okay,
Anything in the
close your
first book
ears.
at this point is fair game, I say.
Well, I
Only
she
10 people listen to
tells,
this anyway. So.
well, yeah, but she tells Rand, hey, I know you love her and she loves you, but you guys aren't right for each other, and you guys, although both like each other that way, will end up basically with other people, because no matter how much you love each other that way, you aren't right for each other. And that's what Min tells them. So when they show um, Rand basically being selfless and stuff, it, because I just found this out recently in the book, I'm at that part and I was slightly irritated by that scene, because although it was great, you had Min, they've already introduced her. So now to basically take that scene away from her and then make up an entirely different scene to basically explain the same thing and make it to where Rand is being this selfless person, it, I don't know, it's, to me, in like my head, it gave me a character development that isn't the same as the book. And that's, and we talked about it before where I bitched about Harry Potter in the movies being this giant wuss, and you have in the books he's this badass always standing up for himself. And I
He
felt like
takes no shit in the
that's,
books. And yet in the show, the movie, he's just like, oh, guys.
but that almost made me feel about Rand was that he's got this fake like hero complex, but he's not really confident in himself enough to do that. But in the book, it's very different. Like he is constantly reflecting on all these things that have happened. He is constantly, similar to Harry, he's trying to stand up for himself and do these things. So it almost felt like out of character in the show for Rand to do that at the end, whereas the book is doing a better job of progressing that story and getting to that point where I felt like they jumped a little bit into that too quickly, because he has not shown us that he's this big selfless person yet. So for that to be the one act of the selflessness when you got this super ultra powerful creature, godlike being, tempting him, and he's just like, no. I'm like, oh, so now he's gonna stand up? Like now he suddenly has enough power to fight? Like it just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like you said, feels like it should have been built a little more, and it's like you said, that development just wasn't there. It did feel like it came out of nowhere, and maybe we'll get more of that on this journey. But again, like you were saying, I don't see the reason why or the motivation behind him deciding to do this alone because he's like, oh, I'm too powerful and dangerous. Like, well, aren't you more dangerous if you're untrained? And if you like, and if more experienced people aren't telling you how to deal with the madness that comes with this, or how to fight it, just one lone crazy guy with immense power, isn't that a little more dangerous? Just someone with no idea how to deal with that, just steadily going madder and madder.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was hinting at. Like he's got himself in a couple situations where he like breaks down a door and does these little things, and then has not portrayed himself as this big selfless person, and then arguably comes across the most powerful being in their, I guess, universe, because I wouldn't say it's Earth, but in their universe, and he's able to just be like, no. I was like, wait a second.
Yeah. So that makes it dangerous for him to go and decide to, well, I'm going to figure this out myself. It's like, well, what if you figure out one wrong? What about, maybe, learning from some of these mentor characters that you have here, because it may become the sort of thing where Rand is so crazy that it doesn't matter that he doesn't side with the Dark One. He's a problem in himself.
Yeah, it goes back to, and I just don't know why they went in this direction. With Moraine, it's like the whole, all right, we're just gonna go do this, and like even his character questions it. Like there's he's like, you never trained me. Yeah, and she's like, don't worry about it. You'll just do it. And it's like, well, what's the plan? Like what? And and they didn't do as good of a job like Spencer in the book now. The 50 million prophecies and all the like they should have done a better job of explaining why she was so certain this would all work out the way it did because she's following these prophecies and stuff. But
Yeah, her answer was just basically, hey, you remember when you were a kid and your dad pushed you in the pool? It's like, that's what I'm doing with you right now.
Well, and Loyal, who in the books is this really important kind of character. There's a lot of things that he does that are so important. And later in one of the chapters I read recently, he goes on this monologue and basically talks about the prophecies and about how they're important, and you can, when they talk about weaving the fabric of time or whatever, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but it's basically you cannot move your thread but only so much. So basically your destiny's set and you can move it a little bit, you can kind of do some things, but there's certain things that are pure destiny and you can't fight, like it's just going to happen. But Loyal and Moraine have this conversation that explains so much that I feel like they just slipped out of the show. And had they just had Lorraine and Moral, or wow, I just fucking combined those two names. Loyal and Moraine, if they would have just had a like 4-minute conversation, it would have explained so much. And instead of just kind of lumping it together and showing us some visuals and we're supposed to draw these conclusions on our own, we talk about it in so many shows how much things benefit from one little sentence of dialogue, and they had so many opportunities to do it, and I feel like they just missed it.
Yeah, it just came off as a little. I mean, it truly felt, especially by the time you got to the end of the final episode, it felt like, okay, they got this big book. They're trying to figure out how to translate it, to a television show, and they're trying, but it's not quite there. Now in a season 2, I still think that they can. I mean, it wasn't bad, but I think they can uh, get better with a season 2. Learn from their mistakes. Say, okay, what worked, what didn't work. We also know that they had to do a bunch of rewrites because of the actor that played Matt. So who knows what his character was supposed to be doing in those episodes? You know what I mean? Like there's things that they were faced with. So the other point y'all brought him up already, Patton Fane. We got finally we get this. They've been teasing the character for a while, but basically he's a dark friend, loyal to the Dark One, and he's there for the Horn of Valir, and he takes it. And then Perrin's there. Loyal gets stabbed, which that was interesting. We'll see what they do with that. But basically, we've set up another antagonist. We've set up this legend, which they needed to do a little more explaining on that, I think, about this horn that will be blown in the final battle. And Patton Fane takes it. So thoughts on that? Spoilers for the books. The second book has that horn is very important in the second book.
I thought that we talk about rushed parts. Um, I think there was a couple hints in the show. Now there's a lot of hints in the book, but there's a couple of hints in the show that Patton Fane's not a great dude. You see him a couple times. You see him walking through Tal Valon or whatever.
Yeah, he's popped up in 3 or 4 episodes in the background.
Yeah, but he doesn't say anything. They just Rand kind of looks over and is like, "Was that? No way!" And then you just don't see him anymore. So there's been a lot of references to him, and you see him in a lot of places. So as far as characters go, I would have liked a little bit more backstory, but there's not really a lot of backstory in the book yet either. So it's one of those things where it's kind of a mystery at first and you don't know why he's helping. And so I have zero issues with how they handled it. Like you said, I wish they would have went into a little bit more the importance of the horn, but they still have a lot of time to do that because now they're going to be hunting for the horn. And that's in the books, but they set it up to where that's what they're going to be doing also. So I didn't have any issues with, as much as I had issues with Rand and some of the ridiculous shit and them not setting some other things up, his storyline and how they did it, I actually felt like they did a good job of dropping little breadcrumbs and then having it pay off there towards the end.
Yeah, for the longest time we didn't know what the deal with him was, but he was suspicious from episode 1. And a lot of, like you said, I guess excellent choice of words there, breadcrumbs, because we got a lot of those. We got a lot of plot hooks that are clearly going to lead into a second season, and apparently that horn is going to be the big MacGuffin of next season. For at least some of our characters. I guess not Rand, because he'll be off elsewhere doing God knows what. But but it was a little odd because and that was the point in the episode. Well, that and the battle itself, because you mentioned that earlier. Where I had to actually pause the episode and check to see if this was the finale, because like you, I thought we had 2 more episodes at least. I thought we were going to be doing like maybe prep for the battle. The battle would start this episode, and it might lead into another episode, and then we'd get another one. But this the way everything's set up and the way we have all these MacGuffins and everyone's set off on a different path now definitely makes this feel like more of a prologue of things to come.
Yeah, it was funny how much time they dedicated to their king, and I just sort of chuckled because I was like, yeah, I get it, but then it's like, what was the point?
It was real fast, yeah.
It was just, it was so, and there's so many characters in the books, and and so they cut a shit ton out, but so far at least. But I just thought it was funny, they're trying to build up, our father defended, these lands and blah blah blah, and then they die and it goes horrible. But yeah, that's time I would have probably cut that out and spent a little more time elsewhere, maybe with Perrin. But speaking of Perrin, yeah, they still he was in this, but that he was there. Didn't really do anything. I mean, Pat Fane, I guess we got the little exposition dump for Perrin to hear. So he's like, all right, I got to get this horn. This dude has it. Me and the other 4 were important. Perrin, I guess, has all the information as far as that. Brandon Sanderson, one of you, I think Larry or one of you posted a interview.
Yeah,
he had just done where he's enjoying the show, and he was pointing out that yes, there are certain elements that they had to cut back on or rearrange, but his biggest gripe seems to be Perrin. He's just like, yeah, he's probably getting the short end of the stick as far as season 1 is concerned.
Well, I think initially they probably, just looking at Matt, because even in the books, Matt and Rand are these kind of like Harry and Ron. They're the focal points, and Matt's always around. So now, halfway through the season, the guy who plays Matt's just like, oh, all right, I got to go. See you guys later. Now, there's that void, and it feels like the show, instead of filling it with like Perrin and Egwene's story or whatever, they filled it with Lan and Nynaeve.
I agree. Yeah.
Which isn't awful. Like, that's an addition that I didn't expect, and I didn't hate it. Nynaeve in the books is irritating as shit, but the actress she must have read the book and been like, I'm going to act just like the girl from the book, because they act identical. And it is one of those things where, as much as it irritates me, I'm like, damn, she's just doing a good job. But it kind of made her almost they humanized her a little bit, where in the book they haven't done that yet to where I got, and she still irritates the shit out of me. But in the show, like, she irritated me until her and Lamb basically were stopped having their disagreements and got together and were just like, hey, this might be basically the last day we're all alive. Let's just, you know, be with each other, and I really like you. And it I liked that character growth, but basically getting rid of Matt, they should have filled it more with Perrin, because I feel like Perrin is in the book such an important character that they almost minimize his importance in this show for whatever reason.
Well,
But I
yeah,
think it was more rewrites than anything.
and it definitely seems like it. You know, it sounded like it was mostly rewrites that were the problem. But you know, and that's a good opportunity, the scene with the horn, though, to make at least a good chunk of next season about Perrin and the path that he's on, because you know he's got to feel responsible for losing that horn, because that happened on his watch, and you know he basically didn't do anything to prevent it. So you know it feels like it's got to be about him in a big way.
The end of the episode was so messed up. I was like, damn. I have a little girl on the beach, and she's just hanging out. And then we see in the distance these ships, these really cool looking ships, and the people on them look, very menacing, and then the outfits they're wearing. And a bunch of the women stand to the front, start um, using, the power, and they create a huge tidal wave. And then you just sort of see the girl in the tidal wave, and you're just like, oh shit. Oh well. There's no context, there's no explanation, there's no dialogue. It's just you see this imposing force coming. They're committing this horrible act. You see already a casualty that'll result from it. And it looked cool, and it's a good setup, like, oh, more stuff's happening, more. We're not just, it's not just the Dark One and Padden Fane and, the Trollocs. Here's people doing horrible things as well. Um, any thoughts on that scene, or just sort of the ending itself of the season?
Yeah, you know, I would have, like you said, liked a little more context behind that scene too. Like I wasn't sure what that was, whether that was just the start of a normal war between two of the human factions, or you know, if like maybe those were perhaps some dark friends, as they call them. You know, like it's hard to say. I do want some context on that scene or what the repercussions were, but you know, maybe I need to read the book more. Spencer, maybe you've got that knowledge.
Nope.
No, because I don't either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I think it was a well done and visually appealing scene, but I don't know what to take away from it yet. It it's hard to say, because they've showed us how strong Nynaeve is, and she can't even control the power yet. In this episode, we just saw how strong Egwene is, and she was able to draw all the power back in, and it was just her. It was just her and Nynaeve, because they were the only two that ended up surviving. But at the time when Egwene helped her, she was the last one left. So for her to be able to pull all that power back into her and be able to help, I I don't I hope there's more to it, but it almost feels like they're just trying to show us what the one power can do, and in the wrong hands how powerful it is. Because these people who are doing all these huge things, they're not doing it on purpose, but they're still able to pull off these great feats. And I think that some of these other things we're seeing are just showing us the adverse side of the one power and what
Yeah,
it can be used for.
I don't know there's a lot of wars and kingdoms and stuff I know in the series, so I'm assuming it's tied to that. I don't know who they are. My only question is, is anything like that happen in the book? And I ask that question because If not, you've created a really weird thing because point I'm making is okay, if you can get a line of women that can do that, cause a tidal wave like that, they can literally wipe out any coastal city. And what could you do to stop it? Um, you just need a couple ships to park off the coast, create a big ass tidal wave, and wipe out the whole city. You know what I mean? Like there has, if you once you put an idea like that out there, you're gonna have to deal with it in terms of the story. So it was one that was the first thing that popped in my mind was, man, if they can do that, you're screwed if there's a coastal city.
Yeah, yeah, and it's one of those things that makes me wonder if it's like if this was a group of Aes Sedai attacking a territory that belongs to the Children of the Light, or what, or is it because of events like this that the Children of the Light exist in the first place? Uh, you know, because
That's
they,
true.
because
Yeah.
they seem fanatical until you see that scene.
that's that's a good point.
In the same way that the Aes Sedai want to rein in the men that can cast because they're prone to going insane. You can understand the Children of the Light would be like, well, everybody that can cast is a danger. What if you don't want that city to be there? What if you don't want this small town to be there? Who could stop you?
Yeah, it gives. That was my immediate thought. Um,
It's like, but I
but
feel like we're lacking a lot of context because it seems like a nod for people who have actually, read through the books. Like maybe they'll know what it is, but we've got no clues.
they're like book 6 when
Yeah, book they created tidal wave to take out some coastal town where Trollocs were hiding or so. I don't know.
the that's about it. I was gonna talk about Lan a little bit, but you already did. I don't have a whole lot more to add to it. He's had one of the better stories of the season, definitely. Between his romantic relationship with Nynaeve, and then his bond with Moraine, and him coming to her side at the end. I am curious to how it works with, okay, if she's cut off from the source, um, does he continue to serve her, or what does their code say? Like, if a Aes Sedai was ever gentle, does their ward go somewhere else? You know what I mean? Like, what is the rules? What is the code amongst their order? And I'm curious how that's going to work. Or is she going to try and keep it a secret?
Well, and you brought that up too. And does he lose part of his power? Because it's almost like they're tied to each other. Part of his ability is tied to the one source as well. It's just he doesn't wield it the same way. It's kind of like instilled in him through her. And that, they have a bond with each other. But now if she's lost that touch with the one source, does he lose his kind of touch with her soul? Because I think that's how they equated it, is
Yeah.
that their souls are bonded or whatever. So if she lost that part of her soul, does that affect him and his ability to be a warder? Does it affect, his speed, his strength, his ability to go days and days and days without sleep and constantly stay awake and constantly monitor shit? Like, that's what I'm curious about, is to see the effect that her being gentle has on him.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like in can that bond even really, yeah, like y'all have been saying, can that bond even really exist with her in the state that she's in? And that does leave potentially things open for him and Nynaeve, especially if she somehow decides to join the Aes Sedai. I mean, she seems less likely than Egwene, to be honest, but it's still a possibility. She does need training. They both do because they've both shown that they're kind of on the same level, even though Egwene looked somewhat weaker before this episode. Like she was more talented, but significantly weaker. But now it's seeming like they're both, kind of powerhouses. So I imagine the Aes Sedai will want them both to join, and maybe only one will. But you know, I feel like he's going to wind up one of their wards or warders.
Yeah. I could see that. But yeah, that's really all I have in my notes. Is there anything else you guys want to say or talk about regarding the Wheel of Time season 1? I guess because this is it.
Well, I think we've said it all, but it's just uh, looking forward to season 2. I hope since they've already started filming and everything, that like you said, a year, maybe a bit optimistic, but I'm hoping for 6 months, because they left on a hell of a cliffhanger, and
6 months.
they got that Bezos money.
We
Okay,
still
so
ain't. I'm still waiting for the boys, man.
you
They're
know,
bullshitting with that. I've been waiting and waiting.
That's true. That's true. Like, but they could start anytime they wanted, because heck, Jeff may have already asked him, like, hey, when are you starting on season 2? And they're like, well, we don't know how one's going to do. He's like, I don't care. I'm giving you the money. When are you starting on season 2?
He's like, and where's my goddamn Lord of the Rings show? It's taking so long. Yeah. Anything, Spencer? I see you're muted.
No, I was listening.
Oh, okay.
I was just laughing at Bezos stuff because it's something we've said 1,001 times, but he just is raking in all the other money officiated with Wheel of Time, because all the people are like, this show's fucking dumb. I can't find my copy of the 5th book. I'm gonna reorder that shit so I can, read it. So he's just raking in money other ways. He is not really concerned, I don't think. I am concerned that just to see how they kind of get it back on track. But I think that Sanderson himself kind of coming in and being like, I'm a little irritated with the parent stuff, but the rest of it, I'm pretty much on board with, means to me that he knows he may be a consulting person on this. So he's kind of steering them in the right direction.
And he probably knows where it's going.
Yeah, exactly. That's
and
why
I'm pretty confident in that they, like I said, the Matt stuff, and they're probably aware that there were some issues, and so I think if they, as long as they have enough time and they're able to, I think, there's a lot of shows that we forget. A lot of the great shows of in history had rough season 1s. Some of them had horrible season 1s, and even rocky season 2s. You can go to shows like the Star Trek: The Next Generation, which is this, classic sci-fi show. The first season's horrible. Go watch it. It's terrible. It took them a while to figure it out and get things going. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is another good example. Had a rough first season. 2, it started to get better, and then season 3, was great. X-Files. Sometimes a show takes a season to for everyone to sort of get everything going. So I think that could be the case with this. But
I was naming a bunch of CW shows.
Arrow is a good example. Arrow season 1's decent, but season 2, woo, that's when shit got good.
Yeah, and we can talk about how crazy it got afterwards.
Well, look,
but season 2.
There's that line of like 2 to 4 is when a show, Supernatural, another great show, that season 1 is pretty good, but when you got to like 2 and 3, the show was great. Sometimes it takes a season or 2 to get going, and so we'll see. Anything else?
Well, I think. Well, I was gonna say, I think a lot of this is gonna hinge on how well new Matt fits into the cast. We'll see that. He could make or break some things since he's such a significant character.
That is a good point. He could bring a new energy. Maybe the actor comes in and
might be a better Matt.
Might be. Hopefully. Well, we hope. He's the one we're getting.
He's going to be the new Michael J. Fox. They get rid of what's his face, and Michael J. comes in and saves the day.
There you go.
Like,
Stolt.
Eric Stoltz.
Yeah. And he's a good actor. He wasn't the right guy for the job. Because if you watch those clips, from Back to the Future.
Yeah, it just wasn't.
It just was weird. Yeah, it's like, and he's a really good actor. He's done a lot of great stuff, and it just didn't. He's not a comedic guy. But
I just posted Matt and
oh, that's the new Matt. All right, what's he done?
he was in Witcher.
Oh, see, now that's what I was actually about to ask. I wanted to know if he had any fight training, and that might bode well, honestly, if he's done any for Witcher.
He was also in the Netflix show that Cursed or whatever with the. It's the. She was basically the King Arthur. She was
yeah.
Lady in the Lake or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so he does. Okay, fantasy is his.
Yeah,
genre.
he's been in several of those things already.
So, like Larry said, maybe he's had some sword training or some spear or staff training, hopefully. But
yeah, Matt's gonna come in doing all kinds of tricks with that knife and everything now.
But all right, so yeah, I think that's it. We'll appreciate everyone listening, and I guess in 2 or 3 years when the new season comes, we'll talk about it. All right.
Bye.
Bye.